Hello there everyone, how you doing today? I hope you're all well. Today we're going into r/AskReddit, where Reddit asks, lawyers of Reddit, what's the worst way you've seen a person screw someone else over in court, whether it be criminal, civil, or divorce proceedings? And Reddit had many answers. If you enjoy, like and subscribe, maybe leave your own stories in the comments below. Now, let's get started, shall we? I was represented by a guy that stole 3 trucks from his work. Only 2 were recovered before the trial. He had the balls to show up to a motion hearing in the 3rd one that was not recovered. I took my ex to court because she had used my social security number to sign up for cable. I found out a lot about it because she stopped paying for the service. She screwed herself over by just being herself. We show up to court. I turn in the contract from the cable company, showing my social security number and her own name signed on the contract. She didn't even try to forge my signature. She signed her own name in and tried to deny that she had any part in it. The judge tore her apart and, well, it was nice. I'm a lawyer, saw someone screw himself. I work as a public servant in criminal law judge's office. And since I have a law degree, I don't normally do administrative work, though I get to be with the judge in some of the hearings. Last month, we had a huge drug trafficking case. I'm talking about 20 or more people involved, months of investigation, undercover agents, videos, audio, the whole ordeal. It lasted 3 days. Anyway, when it was time for one of the defendants to be on the stand so the prosecutor could read the charges he was accusing him of, he was pleading not guilty, as he very loudly stated from the majority of the hearing up until my boss, the judge, told him to shut up or he'd be admonished. To which he replied, "What you gonna do, judge boy? Arrest me?" To which, to be honest, was actually a bit funny. The prosecutor, as part of the facts of this case, told him that he was being accused of selling, trafficking, and carrying a certain amount of drugs, with the base of his operation being his house, where he lived with his partner. Mind you, said partner wasn't even in the hearing. She wasn't arrested or anything, as there was nothing tying her to the case. He said, "Wait up, I was the one selling the drugs. She didn't do anything." His lawyer, a state-assigned public lawyer, facepalmed so hard it's actually recorded in the audio of the hearing. And he still pleaded not guilty. The lawyer be like, "Yes, I did just slap my own face to make that noise. It was worth it." Not someone else, but my client screwed themselves. I'm doing landlord-tenant stuff, and my client was facing eviction over non-payment. But the client was withholding rent payments because of habitability issues in the apartment. No heat, high lead levels, vermin. This is gonna be an easy win for me. Told my client continuously to make sure they don't spend the money. Keep it, but don't spend it. Because if you show the judge you still have the money, it looks real good for you in terms of making the judge believe you're withholding for good reasons. We got up in front of the judge. The landlord doesn't have an attorney, so I'm dancing inside. There's no way I can lose. I make my arguments and the landlord makes his. The judge asks my client if they still have the money. Client goes, "Nah, I blew that shit at the casino last week." Oh my god. That's a dumb person right there. My wife is the lawyer. Info: when children reach the age of majority, if they do not continue studying and start working, it is not necessary to pay alimony. My wife's client found a new lover, which unleashed the wrath of the ex-wife, who started asking for more alimony for her children. Well, to win the case, it was necessary to prove that the children were working, but they could not get any proof of it. There was not much chance of winning, but they still went to court hoping that with the interrogations, they could find information that would put them in evidence. On the day of the trial, the children did not go. Only the mother and her lawyer were present. The judge was like, "Madam, tell me why your children could not come." The mom's like, "They could not get permission at work." Judge stared at the lawyer stared at the judge, and the mom stared at the lawyer, and there was another few seconds of silence. And the judge was like, "Well, that was fast." I had a client who was trying to get away from abusive ex and filed for a restraining order. He shows up to the final hearing and is making a big fuss about a truck that they bought during their marriage. He said it was just his and she has no rights to it because their marriage was void. I asked him on cross-examination what he meant by that. And he said that they all been married in another state when he married my client. He said my client had no idea, but that it means their marriage is invalid and the truck was all his. Not only is that legally inaccurate, the transcript of the hearing was promptly turned over to the police, who were actively investigating him for bigamy. Oh, and the judge gave my client the truck along with a 2-year no-contact order. Hang on, I'm gonna look up what bigamy means. The act of going through a marriage ceremony while already married to another person. Okay. You learn something new every day. Isn't that wonderful? Not a lawyer, but happened to me and some buddies in college. So, a group of friends and I rented a 5-bedroom house in college. And being the group of guys, we were partied pretty hard, and were really rough on the house. We knew going in we were not getting our deposit back. Well, partway through living there, septic started to have some problems whenever someone used the downstairs showers. It would drain slowly, so it would fill slowly as you used it. Also, one of the rooms, the carpet would get wet. So we emailed the property service company to fix it. 2 weeks later, they send out a plumber to snake the line and leave. Well, that didn't fix it, so we emailed again. 2 to 3 weeks later, plumber snake and leave. It's still not fixed. Email, and 2 to 3 weeks later, they scoped the line. Turns out roots had grown into the line, so they had to do a big old process to completely remove all the roots. Now that's fixed. Well, we all move out, go our separate ways. One of my buddies goes to Australia for 9 months. When he gets back, he comes home to a bunch of voicemail. Turns out the property company is coming after us for like $5,000 on top of the deposit. They tried to pressure him into either paying the money or he would be taken to court. He told them he would see them in court. For the couple months leading up to the court date, he would get calls telling him to pay and it would all go away. Day before the first day of court, they call him and tell him to pay $2,000 and give them info from one of the other people on the original lease. He says, "Go to hell, and I'll see you in court." First day of court is just to make sure everyone shows and to schedule the actual case. The lawyer for the property company shows up, is scrambling to figure out what the heck is going on. He had no records beyond the original lease, with changed a couple times as people moved in and out. My buddy helps him out by giving him copies of the multiple emails that we sent to get them to fix the septic and the damage it did to the house. Told my buddy he would let us know how they wanted to proceed, and we never heard from the company ever again. Not a lawyer, but a friend kept meticulous records of how much time his estranged wife spent with their daughter. He used pink highlighter for Mom and blue highlighter for himself. Mom sailed into arbitration demanding full custody and handsome child support and the house. Dad pulled out a 3 years worth of year-long calendars. Mom had spent less than a full month with a child in 3 years. Needless to say, Mom was not happy with the outcome. Not a lawyer, but I was a jury foreman on a case about 5 years back. The guy was accused of attempting to kill his girlfriend. Various charges up and down, the severities were filed. However, the victim's testimony wasn't terribly convincing, especially after cross-examination, and there was only evidence that something had happened in the house that night, but not necessarily that the boyfriend had done it. Anyway, the defense turns to present, and they unexpectedly recess for the day. We come back the next day, and the defendant testifies. He puts himself at the scene and admits to hitting her. We ended up convicting him of everything but attempted murder, if I remember right. Afterwards, the judge came into the jury room and told us that the unexpected recess the previous day was because the defendant insisted on testifying against his lawyer and the judge's advice. If he hadn't testified, basically there was no chance we would have convicted him. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I am being sparse on details here due to confidentiality, but I had a client who was accused of a very nasty, naughty offense. He had an alibi. He was at work where he was the boss. He had an employee who could absolutely vouch for his being there. I talked to the employee and the employee confirmed this. It gets closer to the trial and around the time when I need to send in an alibi notice, which is advance notice to the Crown so they can investigate the alibi and determine whether or not it's true. But I am being careful, so I call the employee up again. Turns out my client fired him into the interim, and so the employee quite candidly tells me, "Oh yeah, he was definitely at work, but that's not what I'll say in court. Frick that guy. He is going down." I did not call him as a witness or file the alibi notice. We still won the trial, but if I hadn't thought to call the guy, or if he had been less candid, my client would have been fricked hard. Sex offender registry and everything. Jail time, all the works, even though he was completely innocent. Too many criminal client situations to count of them screwing themselves over. One of the very few family law cases I handled as a young attorney sticks out to me though. Young woman and young man have a child. The young woman seeks divorce from the young man because he enjoys the thug life. He had recently been arrested and charged for possession with intent to distribute, which is a felony, and in possession of a firearm, which is an unlawful carry. The young man doesn't like her leaving him. He hires a big-name, top divorce attorney. Granted, it's a very rural area. Gets a temporary divorce order entered saying she cannot have overnight guests of the opposite sex, which is common in rural conservative areas. Think it's mostly a thing of the past in urban places now, though. The young woman starts seeing someone new. The young man is very upset about this, has his fancy lawyer ask for a hearing, accusing her of violating the court order and seeking full custody, on top of attorney fees. The young woman, on advice from a mutual friend, hires me for this hearing. I sit down with opposing counsel, and she basically tries to strong-arm me with her experience, and lays out egregious terms. The mother must not only give up primary custody, but must have visitation with a supervisor and pay child support and attorney fees. She knows I'm a new baby attorney in town, fairly certain I had been licensed for less than a year. I balk and she says she'll see us in court. I go into the hearing with a copy of his probation arrangement on his possession with intent to sell, and an unlawful carry. He hasn't told his attorney about this, and she is unaware. She calls him up and establishes how my client had her new boyfriend over on XYZ so-and-so nights. The judge is very conservative and not pleased. Then the opposing counsel passes the witness. I ask him if he has a job. No. What do you do for money? Things here and there. Oh. The opposing counsel is awfully expensive. Do you smell meth? What? Have you ever sold drugs to make ends meet? No. I introduce a copy of his guilty plea and straight probation sentencing. The judge is now staring daggers at him. I lean over to my client sitting next to me and whisper, "If you took a drug test today, be honest with me. Would you be completely clean?" And she answers yes. I ask the young man, "When was the last time you did meth?" The attorney objects, but the judge overrules. I know this judge will drug test people on the spot, as he is also the misdemeanor drug court judge. "It's been years. I'm clean." "So if you were tested, you'd be clean?" "Yes." The opposing counsel asks the same of my client, and we agree. The judge has them both tested. He tests positive for meth. My client is clean. The judge denies his motion and asks me to send in new temporary orders, where the young man is required to maintain employment and start paying child support, and places him on supervised visits. The icing on the cake, the opposing counsel actually calls me and leaves me a voicemail congratulating me on, and I quote, "handing her ass to her for the first time in a long time." More of a case of screwing himself over, but here goes. This was a case another prosecutor in my office had a few years back. A 30-year-old defendant was charged with sexual assault of a child after he got his girlfriend's 14-year-old sister pregnant. She was actually kept the baby, so the police just waited and got a paternity test. No surprise, the defendant was the father. The defendant wanted probation. The prosecutor refused to offer it. He decided to plead guilty and have a jury trial on punishment. Here in Texas, you can choose to have the jury set punishment. Evidence mostly proceeded as expected. The victim testified to having consensual, aside from not being old enough to even consent, naughties with the defendant, getting her pregnant, etc. The paternity test was introduced. The defendant took the stand. His version of events that he snuck into the victim's room at night, covered her mouth, and held her down while he had naughties with her forcibly against her will. It seemed like his own lawyer had no idea that's the story he settled on. The jury deliberated about 15 minutes before returning with a verdict of 17 years. The maximum possible to be charged was 20. When interviewed by the attorney afterwards, one of them said they decided on 17 years so the defendant would never forget the age of consent in Texas again. Why is it 17 and not 18? Also, that story made me feel disgusting. Well, not my story, but a prior boss's story. They had a drunk driver kill a car worth of people case at the time, when they were a general practitioner. My boss was representing the family that got hit, one where the 2 kids and the wife had passed away. but the father had not, and wanted the college guy's drunk driving skin to be mounted on a wall. This was back before Facebook was commonly used in court proceedings, and before tons of people realized that this stiff stuff is too great for any attorney worth their weight in salt to pass up. So the kid, the drunk driving college kid, had managed to get the judge's sympathy during the first part of his hearing by saying he was sorry, he was haunted, he was never going to drink again, and this was going to ruin his life, and so on. And the judge seemed to be really eating it up. Then comes my boss and immediately burns this kid's remorse to the ground by showing numerous Facebook statuses and the photos of them binge drinking, partying, and even joking about driving drunk from the date of the accident up to a night ago. The kid looked like he was being forced to swallow hot coals, and the judge was absolutely livid. Needless to say, the kid had to do way more than just apologize and be remorseful after that. Not my case, but my dad's. He was the equivalent of a public defender decades ago. There was this guy that would get caught for being drunk in public lewdness, and so on. Every weekend he was caught for this. He seemed to draw the same judges and was pretty well known by everyone in the courthouse as an absolutely lost cause. One of the regular judges had him appear in court again. The judge is ready to give him a prison sentence because he was driving a car this time. But the guy starts crying that he finally got a job out of town and was trying to turn his life around. The judge tells him as long as he never makes a mistake in my town again, he would just drop the charges. Well, sure as hell, the guy shows up the following Monday. Same judge, and he was driving drunk again. My dad now has his case, and the judge tells him he gave him his final chance, to which the guy sobs and replies, "I was leaving town, Your Honor, but my friends decided to throw me a going-away party." The judge was not amused, and my dad had to do everything he could to not laugh. And that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, maybe check out my playlist where I have all my Reddit videos on. Who knows, maybe you could even check out my horror story videos. Now I only make them around Halloween, but I sure got a lot done in the past, so you could fill hours or even days up with those. I'll see you next time.